FUD in managed services. I'm not talking about Elmer FUD. Fear, uncertainty, doubt. Is it a tactic that works? If it does work, should it be used in a managed services environment? And could there be a negative consequence to using FUD tactics as an MSP? The answer might surprise you. Coming up next.
You're entering the MSP Zone, a podcast for the managed services community, covering news, analysis, and interviews from around the globe. Elevate your MSP game by staying in the MSP Zone. And now, your host, Charles Weaver.
Okay. For those of you who are not in sales or marketing, maybe you're just an MSP business owner and you're responsible for the growth of your MSP company. You might be interested in things like fear, uncertainty, doubt, FUD. We'll get into where it came from in a moment, but these things matter to those principally concerned with revenue growth in your company. And that's a lot of MSP business owners, it's a lot of MSP executives, it's especially MSP sales professionals and marketing and messaging professionals. So there's a lot of people that are impacted by this topic. And I want to start with where FUD came from. I want to talk about why it's used, why is it successful, and in what areas it is successful, and where it could still be successful in managed services, but it may come at a cost that you don't want to pay. And so let's start first with where it came from. FUD, from what I could tell in my research, started maybe as early as the 1920s. So it's been around for quite a while, but it wasn't until the mid 70s that someone from IBM really started to use it. It kind of incorporated into sales strategy that could best be described as, and it comes back to a very common phrase. Some of you may remember this. Maybe some of you younger folks may not remember this, but the phrase was, nobody ever got fired buying IBM. And that came out of a FUD style tactic, which is, IBM was considered a marquee brand for many, many decades, still is. But when they were selling hardware predominantly and some software, the idea was, hey, look, any other competitor, any other brand that is an IBM, you don't want to take a risk because their stuff may not work. It's maybe inferior to IBM. This is IBM talking here, right? You don't want to risk your job buying something that is an IBM. That's FUD. That's fear, uncertainty, doubt in the mind of the buyer saying, no, I don't, that's a negative outcome. I don't want to risk that. I'm going to go with IBM. That's a prototype FUD model. But it can work outside of IBM. It can work for anything. It's the concept of creating a sense of uncertainty and a sense of, if I don't choose the sales outcome that the sales professional is presenting to me, I am going to have a negative consequence. I'm going to have a negative outcome. And first of all, you might say, well, that seems highly manipulative. And you wouldn't be wrong. It is highly manipulative. It is textbook manipulation. And I don't think that there's any attempt to hide that fact. We'll get to that in a moment as well. But that brings us to the first point, which is FUD as a tactic is very helpful and successful. It works in closing transactional deals. What do I mean by a transactional deal? I mean a transactional deal that could either be something that's lower cost, or if it's a higher cost item, it's a transaction that doesn't require a deep relationship. And if you've studied any of these kind of professional sales books or manuals, they talk. Many of them talk about this concept. And transactional deals are very appealing to the FUD model because they force an emotional response to close the deal in favor of the seller, because that fear, uncertainty, doubt is a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful emotion. So it does work. It still works. It's FUD is still being applied today, just as it was back in the 70s. And for good reason, it just works. Number two, FUD in a managed services environment, practiced, implemented by a managed services team, can interfere with your trusted advisor relationship. How would that happen, you might ask? Well, number one, most MSPs that I know consider themselves to be trusted advisors. They certainly, if asked, how would you be viewed by your managed services customers? Invariably, the response would be, well, I would like to think that we are the trusted advisor to all of our managed services clients. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that over the years, because it's true. It's not just that the MSP thinks it; the customers act it. That is very true, and I've listened to a lot of end user customers speak that way of their MSPs. So I know it's true. Why would you jeopardize that for a transactional deal? It's a legitimate question. And going back to what I said earlier, which is FUD is a very manipulative sales tactic. It preys on emotion, and it is something that gets to the heart of fear mongering, and playing on that mental state with a customer. That if you get, first of all, FUD is very easy to identify, right? If you're paying attention, you can tell if someone's trying to use FUD. I mean, I can tell when someone's trying to use FUD, whether it's buying a car or, you know, do you really want to not have your new smartphone protected by some extended warranty? You really should. What if you drop it and break the screen, right? I mean, that's a FUD tactic, textbook FUD. Why would you risk that trusted advisor relationship for a cheap, temporary, transactional win? FUD, and this gets to the third point, FUD is a tool, as I said, that is very useful. It works in transactional deals, but it's not necessary in managed services deals. Why is that true? It's true because managed services chiefly has as its basis the MSP as a trusted advisor with the client. And that trusted advisor relationship, that status, has come about or is coming about because the MSP is acting not as a fear, uncertainty, doubt monger, but they are acting as a true partner. They're acting as an advisor, as a counselor, as an entity that is giving dispassionate and agnostic advice. And they're saying, I don't care if brand X or brand Y or brand Z are all out there. We're going to choose the best for you regardless. And that gives a lot of, that is so powerful. I can't even explain, I can't attempt to begin to explain to you why that neutrality on the part of MSPs translates so powerfully into a trusted advisor status. Trust me, it does. Talk to any MSP and they'll tell you the same thing. FUD, you don't need it to sell managed services. All you need is that neutrality. All you need is to be an expert in what your field is, and you can't skip on that. You have to be knowledgeable about what you do. You have to be honest about what you do. You have to be neutral or agnostic about the vendors and the technologies that you're recommending. You have to believe in them, but you have to be rising above that FUD layer and just trust that your guidance and your counsel is what is going to get the job and the deal done. FUD, you don't need it. It's not going to push you over the edge. And even if you do, if it's likely going to come at the cost of either eliminating or eroding that trusted advisor status. Think about that before you start to use FUD again, at least for managed services. You want to use it for break fix and other stuff. That's really up to you. But in managed services, I just don't think it's needed. I think it can get in the way. It can actually have some really negative consequences. and you have so many more powerful tools to help you close deals in managed services today. Give it a try. See you next time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so you'll get notified when future episodes are released. We will see you next time in the MSP Zone.